Good evening, good morning, or whatever it is out there to all you listeners. This is the Accelerativ Thrust podcast. I'm here with my friend Erik, and I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Dan. How are you tonight, Erik, or tomorrow, or whatever it is when these listeners
Am I supposed to use
listening?
my radio voice too?
Yeah, but you got to do the more. I'm
a shock jock.
You're a shock jock, and I'm a late night cool cat.
Shit, that's how I've always described you to people. Do you know Dan Orr? He's a late night cool cat.
Cool cat. Well, we just came up with the title of the episode within the first 30 seconds. This is going to be a good one, guys. So, how are you doing, Erik? Erik, am I allowed to say your last name?
Yeah, for sure.
Erik Whitaker.
Yeah, I'm doing good. Well, I'm doing both, good and well.
That's good and well. That's awesome.
It's all well and good.
You know,
yeah.
It's good to be good, but it's even better to be good and well because, I mean, well is kind of like the extra to good, isn't it?
I don't know. It goes good, better, wellest. I think is
wellest.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is that I don't know the English language. What is that a word?
Wellest?
Because I still say like sometimes I say funner, and unironically, I just completely forget that that totally isn't a word. There's so many words out there that I use that I find out don't exist.
I often use a word and then go, if that's even a word. And then usually it is a real actual word, but it's like a word I've heard, but I don't know if I use it right, so.
Yeah. We should just really invent our own language on this show.
Oh my God, yeah. I'm sure we'd have a lot of listeners.
Yeah, I mean, that'll be like the bonus when we get past 5,000 listeners or something. That'll be like the bonus episode. It'll be like an introduction to whatever we decide to call our language.
Yeah, well, okay. Yeah, if we ever were to get 5,000 listeners, I will learn a whole new language.
You listeners have a lot of work to do. Get on it.
That we make up.
Just go word of mouth. They say it's the most I don't know. They say it's the best marketing technique is word of mouth.
Unless you're using a made-up language.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, when you market it, don't use the language. That's definitely true. See, what you do is you bring them in using the regular language, and then you just kind of what is it? I don't know what I'm trying to say. What am I trying to say, Erik?
You slowly introduce the new language.
There you go. Indoctrinate
There
them.
you go. Kind of like in Clockwork Orange, how in the book, half the words are sort of just made up, but you sort of through context figure out what they're trying to say. I guess the movie's the same way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good movie. Very wholesome movie.
Yeah. Yeah, they drink milk. They listen to classical music. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. There's all kinds of calming parts, like when that guy's watching that film through his eye.
Yeah, he just gets to watch movies. It's nice.
In a dark room.
Yeah, and they moisten his eyes for him. He doesn't even have to blink.
Yeah, yeah, it's like that's a very comforting thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish somebody would do that.
For you?
Well, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe not in the way that they were doing it in the movie. I'm going to just start becoming serious about the movie now. It was a good movie.
Actually, it's pretty offensive. It's kind of hard to watch. Yeah.
We can't. What are you doing watching this? My art of film class in high school, my teacher in that class actually allowed. I don't think it was my class. I don't remember if we watched it, but I know there was a class that actually got to watch A Clockwork Orange.
Yeah.
In high school.
Was that John Deason?
That was John Deason.
Yeah,
he's a
great
fantastic teacher.
Yeah.
And man, he got away with showing us a lot of interesting movies.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I do think his intentions were that we see really well-made movies that took a lot of risks. I don't think he showed us things just for shock value, which is a good thing because the class wasn't art of shock value. It was the art of film. So,
Right, yeah, he genuinely liked these films.
Yeah.
He wasn't like even though some of it as a 15-year-old or whatever, I saw it as funny at the time,
for sure.
Yeah.
But
like I remember we watched this movie that I absolutely love to this day called Simple Men. Have you ever seen that?
I don't think so. Mm-mm.
Simple Men, I can't even begin to describe the plot to this movie. It's just one of those weird sort of like 90s indie movies that kind of doesn't make any sense, but kind of does. But I just remember there's one part where there's actually a dance sequence to Cool Thing by Sonic Youth.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And like they're dancing in this bar, and it's hilarious because it's actual like calculated dancing.
Oh,
like it's
yeah.
like they're actually like people actually do that to like Cool Thing by Sonic Youth.
Nice.
It's pretty funny. It's hard to tell sometimes if directors use that type of stuff to be funny or not. Like that one part, and you're gonna know this better than me, but the TV series Twin Peaks, who's the hunky dude who's on the motorcycle all the time?
James Hurley.
James, yeah. That one part where he sings that song.
Oh, that song! It's one of the best songs of all time, dude.
But it's like that part
just
is so
you and
like,
I. Oh my god.
Yeah, just you and I.
Oh, it's so
but
good.
that part is just so. I don't know if David Lynch. I could never tell if David Lynch in any of his interviews or anything that I've ever seen with the guy, I can never tell if he's being like serious or not with some of the stuff that like. Okay, there's this like presentation that he gave about. Oh, I'm blanking again. It's the he does the transcendental meditation, and he actually visits out there by Fairfield, Iowa, in the Mahavishnu Vedic city to do that. And he's doing this presentation, and he's talking to like a group of college students, probably on campus. But they're all like in their 20s or whatever, and he's like encouraging them hardcore to like give money to like, like give money to the organization so that they can do transcendental meditation. And some girl like asks him, raises her hand and asks him, what am I going to tell my parents when I say that I want the college tuition to go towards transcendental meditation instead of my college, because I know my parents aren't going to allow that. And his answer is, tell your parents that it would be a beautiful thing if you gave them money to study transcendental meditation. And like
I think
the whole
you cut
place,
out right
like,
at the
just erupts in
punchline.
Laughter.
I didn't hear what you said. I'm sorry.
You didn't hear what I said? Okay.
No, it was right
So
at the
I'll say it-
punchline too.
Okay, so I'll say it again.
Okay.
How far did you get to? What's the last thing?
What are my parents? And then David Lynch said, "Tell your
Okay,
parents."
all right, yeah, okay, yeah. So David Lynch says, "Tell your parents that it would be a beautiful thing if they gave money for you to study transcendental." And he says it with like, it seems like no sense of irony whatsoever.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, it's just people don't, you know what I mean? Like normally people just don't react to, that way to, you know what I mean? It's just David Lynch is like a master at that kind of, tricker. I almost want to call it trickery, but it's just so hard to tell if he's like being serious or not.
Yeah.
And that's
I don't
one of the
know
reasons.
either. Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why I love David Lynch, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Like I've seen the movie Eraserhead probably, I don't know, maybe like 20 times, 25 times in my life, starting when I was way too young to see it. And when I was really young, when I first saw it, I would show people because it's weird, you know? And I think when you're young, especially a teenager, you try to represent how weird you are by the stuff that you're into, you know? Like, oh, I like this, so I'm going to show everybody that I'm into this so they know that I'm weird, you know? But I always just thought it was this weird movie that was just insane and blah, blah, blah. And then as time went on, like maybe about a decade ago, I watched it again and I could not stop laughing. Like I thought it was just the darkest comedy I've ever seen. Like every moment was just like, it was kind of like watching Curb Your Enthusiasm or something. If you've ever seen that, it's just like cringe humor, you know? And then I watched it again recently and it was sort of a combination of like, whoa, I think this is actually pretty deep and weird, but also pretty funny at times too. So that's what I like about things that aren't super specific. Like they change along with you. You know what I mean? Like when you experience it at different ages, it's a different thing. I think David Lynch's stuff for the most part is pretty good for that because he doesn't really give you a lot of answers. And because of that, you have to find the answers. His stuff finds you where you're at, you know, and that's pretty cool. So anyway, but yeah, that James Hurley song rips, and it's also hilarious because it comes out of nowhere. Like James Hurley, before this moment in the show, never plays guitar. He's never mentioned that he plays guitar or writes songs or sings. Maddie, Laura Palmer's cousin, and Donna are singing with him, and it's obviously something that they've practiced a lot, and we somehow have never seen this happen. And when he starts playing, there's other instruments. Like, there's like almost like there's a bass and some drums, and it's just like, what the hell is happening right now?
Not only that, the thing that's exactly what I was going to say makes the part so funny to me is that it's clearly a studio recorded version of the song that he's lip syncing to with this big guitar, and all he's got is a guitar. There's no drums.
Yeah.
And also his voice, I think, if I remember right, sounds like it's doubled. And
it's got a slapback reverb on it, like a Sun
like
Records
a bunch
style.
Of reverb.
Yeah.
It's so funny, and it's like
it's just out of nowhere. It's great.
I remember reading some message board a while back about that. People were getting offended. Like, this is how serious some people get about, like, David Lynch. People were offended that people found that funny on this message board. Like, there were people that were just like, oh, yeah, it's so funny that he's singing his girlfriend, you know, like a love song. Geez, you know, this is no different than any other, like, time in a movie when a guy sings a love song to his girlfriend. I'm like, but yes, it is. Yes. It's way different than any other time.
And that's the other thing, too, though, is, like, I think that David Lynch uses a lot of shorthand or, like, ways to get to a conclusion that are a little non-linear or at least non-narrative. So, like, in that scene, it's just James singing in his admittedly hilariously high voice. And he's singing it to Donna and Maddie, and they're singing it back to him. And it's like kind of gross how into it they all are, you know? And they just keep kind of going back between showing Donna and Maddie and James. And like, it's just this real goofy, like saccharine sweet love moment to show their love triangle or whatever. But they use this one song to fill in all those gaps. Like, instead of telling us all of this, like, oh, there's this big love triangle and Donna's really jealous and Maddie, like, James is in love with Maddie because she reminds him of Laura or whatever. Like, they just sing this dumbass song and make lovey faces at each other. Like, it's a pretty effective way to tell us this entire story in a 2-minute dumbass song. You know, and maybe, again, I'm giving too much credit to David Lynch. Maybe he just wrote this song and thought, oh, I'm just going to have these people in my show sing it. But I don't know, you know.
Yeah, that again. That's just the genius of David Lynch.
Yeah.
He's going to make you ask these questions.
You're going to give him credit for being real smart, even though he might not be.
Yeah, he might not be at all. Like,
that's what he's curated. I guess what he's. That's great.
I haven't seen any of this, but I guess lately he's been giving, like during quarantine, he's been giving weather reports.
Yeah, that was something he did a long time ago, and he sort of resurrected it for.
Oh, okay.
The pandemic, but it is
the pandemic. That's just that's hilarious.
They're pretty good. Yeah,
I've never watched any of them. I'm gonna have to dig into that sometime. But well, we got some music to talk about,
other than James Early's.
Other than James
song.
Early and David Lynch. Have you heard the David Lynch albums?
Oh yeah. I really like them a lot. Yeah.
Okay. I still haven't, so I'm gonna have to.
Well, maybe I'll choose one for an upcoming episode.
Awesome.
Nice.
Awesome. That would be great. All right. So okay, on to now. You said that I'm first this time, right, Eric?
That's right.
Okay. I can never remember. Yeah. Let me preface this week by saying that the two releases that I picked this week, I actually just recently got into. Like, I'm talking like a month at the most, either of them. So I'm picking really new ones for me, but they're really, really old ones in reality. Anyway, the first one I'm going to talk about is this record from this group called The Streets, called Original Pirate Material, which I do remember The Streets getting quite a bit of hype when they first came out. And I do remember the single. It was sort of a hit single off this record that was getting played quite a bit, called Let's Push Things Forward, featuring this guy named Kevin Mark Trail. And the only reason why I know that is because I'm looking at the Wikipedia right now. But I couldn't, I mean, I'm going to say, I'm just going to say this right now. I couldn't stand that song when it came out in 2002. And also, I was in a completely different place in my life as far as the music that I was willing to give a chance to at that time. And this was just something that sounded way too out of left field for me. What I do remember kind of appreciating about it, though, was that it did seem like it was sort of a it did sort of seem like it was bringing hip hop that was out of left field to the mainstream. Like in 2002, when this record came out, it was highly unlikely that a record like this would actually be mainstream. But here we are. I mean, it was actually quite big back then. And I don't think it appealed to like hip hop heads per se. I think it kind of appealed to people who were maybe more into underground music, because this isn't just a straight up hip hop record. To me, that being said, it's very British. I remember talking about the Sleaford Mods. I wouldn't be surprised if the Sleaford Mods maybe had some inspiration from this group. I don't know if that's for sure or not, but basically what the Streets are, and I guess I could say were, because from what I understand, he's kind of quit doing the project, I think as like a couple years ago or something like that. But it was basically a one-man band. He recorded this record in like an apartment, I believe over in England they call it a flat. And I think he just used whatever technology was sort of available at that time as far as like digital technology. And obviously he was using a lot of samplers and things like that. And, he made some really, really awesome beats. But yeah, basically from what I understand, this was definitely more of a project than it was like a band. So I don't know if his intention was to actually get big off of this, but this might be kind of like a sort of a fluke, kind of like the one thing that I think of is like Ben Gibbard from the band Death Cab for Cutie had that really successful group called the Postal Service that kind of accidentally got huge. And I kind of wonder if that's sort of what the situation was with this. I'm not really quite sure. In any case, it's just a really interesting album. That track, Let's Push Things Forward, I love it now. And there's just some really great beats on here. And it definitely has that feeling of kind of like a bedroom hip hop album, sort of like you can kind of tell in a way that it was recorded in an apartment, maybe not using the best equipment of the time or whatever, but it's also not it's anything but like it's not lo-fi or anything like that. It's definitely like got really, really good production. I just think that it's a really interesting record. I like that it's really working class. Again, that kind of, makes me think of Sleaford Mods, because as silly as they sound and as silly as the Streets sound sometime, there's definitely some social commentary going on, but there's also, like the Sleaford Mods, and I kind of hate comparing the two, but they both kind of, as far as in my estimation, they both kind of have similar content at times. There's also a lot of songs about getting drunk and like eating like food and just sort of partying and things like that, but not in a like a really just sort of like mindless way. I think that this was a really intelligently put together album. And I think the reason why it communicates to me now way better than it did when it first came out is because I've given a lot of stuff a chance since then. And I not that this isn't like a really experimental record or a really avant-garde record or super left field, but when you consider the context of when it came out in 2002 and what was popular as far as rap goes in 2002, it very much is. And so I just think opening myself up to different like things has really kind of made me get into an album like this. What did you think, Eric?
Yeah, I liked it a lot. Like you said, it's very, very British. And it did remind me of Sleaford Mods in that sense, where it's not really... Sometimes there's rhyming, but a lot of times it's very conversational too, and very like evokes a lot of images. It's kind of just describing what's happening. And yeah, but I really liked the music, and I liked there were a lot of different styles represented. I think it was at its core really hip hop oriented, obviously. Like if you took everything else away and it was just the drums and the vocals, it would just be hip hop. So I don't think the song structure and things like that get that weird, but the other elements that come in are pretty cool. There's a lot of dub, there's a lot of house and techno, which all makes a lot of sense. That's all really kind of British too. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I listened to it a number of times. They say geezer a lot.
Yeah.
Like maybe 10 times per song.
That's really cool. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. I want to check out more because I want to see where they went.
I actually, that's interesting you say that, because in addition to listening to this record, I also listened to the second record, which is titled A Grand Don't Come for Free.
Okay.
And that record is actually like kind of like a sort of a like an opera. It's like a concept album.
Wow.
And there's actually a story behind it. Very interesting.
Okay.
It's actually a little bit different than the first one, but there's elements of the first one, but I would say it's just as good.
Yeah, I think I'll check out more of this. I'm not completely unconvinced that you, Dan, didn't pick this because you wanted me to do an English accent again. but I'm not going to.
I have been picking some British stuff lately, haven't I?
But,
Like,
yeah, I would say honestly, if you like Sleaford Mods, or if you like the sound of British rap, like this is definitely check this out. I think it's cool. I think the production was cool, and it does get weird. It's not super straightforward stuff. Like, and the vocal delivery is real cool. You know, like,
and
I think it's great.
That's also another thing that I want to point out too, is that I really like that single. I didn't pick up on this when it was being played all the time. And there was probably a part of me too in 2002 that was like, well, I'm an underground kid. I don't want any of this stuff that's hyped up. You know what I mean? Or there might have been an element of that. Like maybe I just kind of dismissed it as like hipster stuff or something. Yeah. But I love that song, Let's Push Things Forward. And that hook that's sung, I just love, the lyrics to that. You say that everything sounds the same, then you go buy them. I think it's like, there are no more choices, my friend. Let's push things forward. Yeah. It's such a simple concept to sing about, but it's so true. And I can see why the Streets, this project, again, that existed, it pretty much the mainstream. I remember this being like everyone, like it was on critics' best of year-end lists back in like 2002. I don't know if you remember the hype behind this group at all, Eric.
This was the first time I'd heard of them, is when you suggested it. So.
Yeah, this was really hyped up. Like, and I might be kind of overstating that a little bit, but I just remember like MTV2 was kind of the channel, the default channel that everyone watched in 2002 to actually watch music videos, which that's obviously changed since then. But like the regular MTV wasn't playing videos. And I just remember this being in regular rotation around that time. And so maybe I'm overstating the popularity they had, but it seemed to me like there was a lot of hype around this. And now I listen to it with ears in 2021 and I can see why.
Yeah, I thought it was cool. And yeah, there are moments that are really cool. I think my favorite track on it is probably Same Old Thing. And I think it's just because the vocal delivery, again, I'm not going to do an impression, but it's just very British. It's very out of time. And it's fun to listen to. It's kind of shocking in a way, how it's put together. So, yeah, good stuff.
Cool. All right, what do you got for me, Eric?
Well, sorry, I got something in my throat for you. Wait, no, that came out wrong.
Don't spit it over here.
Okay. So yeah, the first one is, and I knew that either Dan or I would have to pick this week or upcoming soon. I think it's kind of a no-brainer that we'd have to listen to it. But it's Godspeed You Black Emperor, their new record. It's called God's P at State's End. And God is spelled lowercase g _ d apostrophe s, God's P, which I guess kind of sounds like Godspeed. So
okay, I actually just now picked up on that.
But so kind of a goofy title, but I mean they always have a goofy title. It's pretty good. I think that anyone who likes Godspeed is not going to be that surprised by this, but I think it's really good. And I think that Godspeed holds a certain place in just about every underground music fan's life, in the lexicon. Like the first time I ever heard it, my friend Sean and I were at another friend of ours' house, Ryan, and he had lived, I think, in California or somewhere much cooler than Iowa, and he brought back the F Sharp record. And
the first one.
And we listened to it, and we openly were not trying to be cool. Like we openly talked about how we had never heard anything like this, how this was the most amazing thing we'd ever heard, how it was like a movie score, but there were vocal samples over it and all this stuff. And we were blown away, and I still sort of am blown away in a way. But it's also, I think that they became so much like the example of this kind of music. Like, before anyone knew what post-rock was, they knew Godspeed You Black Emperor. Like, it almost became like Kleenex. Like, no one says, hand me a tissue. They say, hand me a Kleenex. Like, if someone said, like Mogwai or something, and they'd say, oh, what kind of music is it? You'd say, well, they sound kind of like Godspeed You Black Emperor. Like, they just became the ambassadors for this kind of music. And I think that's something that's easy to forget when you're listening to this, because we've heard so much like it now. But I think they pull it off, and I think it's super good. I don't think this one is as sparse and sort of wide open and desolate as the first few records, and it's not really as heavy and aggressive almost as like the fourth and fifth album, and like Luciferian Towers, the one before this, I felt was like pretty accessible. I don't want to say it was poppy by any means, but it had an upbeat element to it. I would say that this album really is the culmination of all of those different things. It's sparse, it's twangy, but it's also heavy. It sounds like, doom, ambient metal at certain moments, but it also does kind of have these uplifting, epic moments too. So it's like, it is the culmination of everything they've done up to this point, as far as I can tell. And I thought it was super good, and if you like Godspeed, you're gonna love it. So I just don't think it was all that surprising or shocking, but I thought it was very good and exactly what I would hope they put out. So what'd you think, Dan?
I thought it was great. I don't really have much to add to the conversation. You pretty much summed it up for me exactly how I would say. It sounds like a Godspeed You Black Emperor record, which is not a bad thing, because it is a Godspeed You Black Emperor record. One thing that you touched on that I think is really interesting, and that I have kind of completely forgotten about, is just how forward thinking this group was back in like the early 2000s. I remember you were the one who actually recommended that I listen to the Slow Riot for New Canada EP.
Yeah, that one's so good.
That was the first one that I heard. It's still my favorite release from them. And I got to be honest, after I went back and I got the F sharp, A sharp, I don't even remember what it's actually called, but the actual Infinity, that's it. Yeah. I went back and got that, and then as soon as Lift Your Skinny Fist Like Antennas to Heaven came out, I bought that one, and then I just kind of lost track of Godspeed after that. So I got to admit, I never listened to what is it, like Yankee XYO,
and that one
like
sort of is a bridge, I feel, between Lift Your Skinny Fist and the two records that came after that, Alleluia and Asunder. Of course, they have much longer names than that, but both of those are like they get kind of heavy. I don't know. They have a dense, heavy sound to them. So, might be something you'd like.
It probably would be, and it's not. They were just kind of a group. Well, I know they took like a long hiatus, like for a while, and so they weren't really putting anything out.
Right.
And that has nothing to do with why I haven't checked out any of the records between Lift Your Skinny Fists and Godspeed, but I just never got around to it for whatever reason.
There was a solid decade though between the third record and the fourth record, so a lot can happen in there. And not only that, but like I said, probably 50 bands in that time came out that sounded just like Godspeed.
That sounded just like him. Yep. I remember that was actually that was a big thing, even in the local scene around here. There were bands popping up with that sort of thing. And before you knew it, well, like you mentioned, it seemed like everybody who used to be in a grindcore band was starting a band that sounded like Godspeed.
Well, yeah. It makes sense, though. I mean,
it does. It makes sense in a really weird way. The one thing that I would say, and I think that you were kind of saying this maybe a little bit, is the one thing that I would say about this record, if I had to give any sort of like very minimal criticism of it, it's just that to me, it's just so hard to top records like Slow Riot for New Canada, because that record was so forward thinking at that time. Like I mentioned, I hate continually using that term, but I had never heard anything like it at that time.
And the way things were packaged, like that became the norm. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like, the F sharp, A sharp, is that the one, the red covered one? I don't know. They sent along like smashed pennies and like handmade, hand printed things and all this.
Yeah, that was that one.
You know, and like that became a big thing. But I didn't know of anyone else doing that before them. Like they really hit the ground running as a fully formed concept that would change a lot of how music was not only made and recorded, but also presented to us and the products that were made. All of a sudden, a handmade, hand-printed record cover was like a really big deal. Or like hand embossed.
Absolutely.
Is like, whoa, that's a thing I want. Before that, I never knew anyone that did anything like that, you know?
Yeah, so. It's kind of like what you were talking about with Sean, about how he understands presentation.
Yeah, Sean Reed. Absolutely.
Godspeed were like almost like they were almost like the inventors, if you will, of that sort of concept, at least in underground music. But yeah, no, this record, one thing that I did really like about it is and I'm assuming from how you're describing the records after Lift Your Skinny Fists, between that and this record, I like the kind of stripped downness of it a little bit. Like it definitely sounded more rock than say like Slow Riot for New Canada. It like sounded less, I guess, like magical, but not in a bad way. Like it just, there's something like when I put on Slow Riot, I just, and Lift Your Skinny Fists, there's something just almost like magical. Like I almost feel like I'm being transported like in a fantasy movie or something.
It's very
like it's
orchestral, for sure.
Yeah, very, very orchestral. But I really liked a lot of the ambient parts on this record, and I definitely can just see where this is just pretty much a continuation of where Godspeed, has been going for a long time.
Yeah, the one thing that I noticed on this that I don't think I've heard very much on the other records was like a really crazy lead, like a ripping ass heavy metal lead guitar. Like almost like a John
great.
Carpenter. Like I'm trying to think of the kind of movies that have this guitar in them, but yeah, it's almost like an 80s horror electric guitar, like Peavey distortion. I don't know.
Yeah, it's really.
But it's cool. But it's at the same time kind of like, whoa, that's weird.
Yeah, that's one thing that I do like about Godspeed is they seem to have kind of a sense of humor about themselves a little bit too. It doesn't seem like they take themselves too seriously either, even though the music is very emotional. I mean, that's all proven by the second song, Moya, on Slow Riot for New Canada, where it's like literally that guy's pretty much reciting lyrics from a Blaze Bayley Iron Maiden song called Virus. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
When I found that out, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, they definitely have irreverence for not only for systems and government and music itself, but even themselves. Like they don't even respect what they do in a certain way, which is great.
Yeah,
you have to be that way, especially
awesome.
when you're trying to sell people 11-minute long orchestral rock songs. You know what I mean? Like you have to.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I thought it was really good. And like I said, if you like Godspeed or Silver Mount Zion or Mogwai or Explosions in the Sky, like all that stuff, you're going to like this too. So you might as well get it. So.
Or 80s heavy metal guitar
it's
solos
not throughout
in
the
movies.
whole thing, but there were just a couple moments of some ripping ass solos in it. So.
Yeah, I do remember that. It was really pretty funny, but it was funny in like the best way.
Yeah.
Good
stuff. Yeah. What do you got next?
Okay, so the next record I got is from this band called UNWOUND or UNWOUND. I don't know how they pronounce it. But I'm going to say that it's UNWOUND. So those, if there's any hardcore UNWOUND or UNWOUND fans out there listening, just let me know on Instagram, which, by the way, you can visit both me and Erik. I'm going to just go ahead and do the plug right now. At Dan_the_ruler or at Old Man Erie, which is all lowercase. And you can also visit us at the Accelerativ Thrust Instagram and Accelerativ Thrust Facebook. So right there is where you're going to want to let me know if I'm pronouncing this band's name wrong.
And if you could get real mad and be pretty mean about it, I think it'd be better for all of us.
Yeah, just let me have it, ladies and gentlemen. So this is UNWOUND. Like I said, I'm just going to go with that. This is this is confusing because I looked this up on Wikipedia. It says it's their 4th studio album, which technically that's true. But it's their 3rd album that was released. Their first studio album, which was self-titled, was recorded in like 1992 or something like that. But it was shelved because they got a new drummer. And then their 2nd, 3rd, and 4th record became their 1st, 2nd, and 3rd record. And then they eventually released that 1st record as their 4th album.
Wait.
So it was like their first album was their 4th album that got released.
Weird. All right.
Cool. Yeah, very strange. And they make sure to specify this on the Wikipedia. So I don't know if that's how the band wants it to be remembered. It makes sense, if they do, because I'm sure that, but if you've already released 3 albums on a label and then this 4th record that got shelved that you recorded 3 or 4 years ago, you probably view that record a lot differently than you do the first 3 that you released. But anyway, so this record is called The Future of What? And this is just a prime example of a band that I would have just totally loved back in like high school or my early 20s. It's just straight up like, for the most part, post-hardcore thrash. Not unlike Fugazi or, I don't know, even something like as crazy at times as, I don't know, Drive Like Jehu or the Jesus Lizard or something like that. But one thing about this band that stands out to me is there's some other like sort of weird things in their music that I kind of feel is kind of going on at times, because while that is very true and it's very like bass heavy music driven most of the time, there's these moments where things really slow down and become almost like these short sort of ambient instrumental pieces. Like I could see where maybe some shoegaze bands may have been listening to this band a little bit, or vice versa, because I'm sure that a lot of shoegaze predates this band. And I could see where this band was listening to both, maybe, I don't know, both Fugazi and The Cure, because there's moments where it's just a beautiful sounding record. And then there's moments where it like the vocals are just like blood curdling and the music just sounds like a razor cutting you. I mean, it's just really like the tones are just really my cup of tea for when I was playing in a hardcore band. And I'm just surprised that I didn't really discover this band until like 2 years ago when I was like 38 years old, because this is totally stuff that would have been my shit back in high school. It's my shit now. I really like it. It has these like weird sort of like bonus tracks at the end.
Yeah.
Like the last like 4 tracks are bonus tracks that kind of don't make any sense. Like why they're even, added, which I think adds to like sort of like what I was talking about. There's more than just hardcore to this band, which is something that I really appreciate. And like the last 4 records just kind of, they have this like weird almost, I don't know, like almost field recording element to them or something. I don't know. You guys would just have to listen, because I can't really describe it. But yeah, if you're into like stuff like Fugazi, the Jesus Lizard, if you're into just sort of the heavier, noisier rock that was kind of coming out of like the Amphetamine Reptile stuff, and really like emotive sort of rock, like At the Drive-In even, or something like that. I mean, yeah, this is pretty much the band for you, and I really like it. What did you think, Eric?
Yeah, I thought it was good, and it changed a lot over the course of the record. I do have to ask you, so those are bonus tracks, so were those not on the original release?
Yeah, they were apparently not on the original, like, I think it might have only been a vinyl only release, and then when it came out on CD, they added those bonus tracks 14 through 17.
14 through 17.
Because they...
All right, cool.
Yeah, they totally did not fit with the rest of the album.
Yeah, the thing about it is that it changed a lot over the course of the record, and for it to end that way didn't seem that crazy to me, but it did seem like a hard turn into what happens there.
Exactly.
It's I liked it, but the thing was, when it first started, I was like, oh, okay, I get it. This is just kind of that emo, kind of hardcore stuff that I don't know anything about. And then after the first couple songs, things started to change a lot. And I found myself thinking, this is actually closer to like early Sonic Youth than hardcore. And then it got to some songs where it's like really Nirvana-esque, like for real, like his vocals sounded a lot like Kurt Cobain, and it sounded a lot like Shellac, and things like that. But it also sounded a lot like, in my limited scope of this kind of music, like Quicksand and stuff like that. And the fact that it's 1995, it really felt to me like maybe not a conscious bridge between grunge and emo, but like maybe even a subconscious one. Like, I just heard a lot of stuff that sounded like the early 90s coming into the stuff that sounds like the late 90s, and it happens like right in the middle, and so it to me sort of had this bridge feel to it. And I ended up liking it a lot. I liked all the sort of noisescapes and things like that. Yeah, with those bonus tracks, I like where it ended up. It was just basically almost like music concrete. It was like there was an organ, but mostly it was just kind of machinery sounds and noise and stuff, which is great. I love that kind of stuff, but it seemed a little like a hard shift into those last few tracks. But they definitely established a foundation for that to happen throughout the record. There was a lot of interludes and moments in songs that, just kind of went into noise ambient territory. So it was fine. But I would say, if you are a fan of 90s music in general, you're going to find something on this that you like. And it's going to be different enough that you might end up liking other elements of it too you didn't expect. So I thought it was good. I'd never heard of this group, but I know that I've read the name a lot. People are into it. I think a lot of people cite it as an influence, or at least something that helped shape what they do now. And so I think it's kind of coming into its own now. I don't know how popular it was at the time, but it seems like people are looking at it. So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I constantly hear bands talk about how Unwound was a big influence on them.
Yep.
So, yeah, again, it's kind of weird that I'm just now checking it out, but here we are.
Nice.
Here we are. Okay. Album number 2 for you, Erik.
So, speaking of influences, my second pick is by a small little unknown group called Portishead. And the album is called Third, and it is their third album. And it came out in 2008, which is quite a long time after Dummy came out, their first run. And so, even though they are one of my favorite groups, they really are, they're a huge influence on me musically. Like, if you listen to my stuff and you think about Erik's just trying to sound like Portishead, you're going to get it instantly. It's not even like I'm trying to hide it. And the reason I never really got into this, I think I had sort of moved on from that kind of music, or I just thought of Portishead as an old thing and they're trying to recapture it, and that never really goes well for the most part. But really what really turned me off about this record, and this is where my actual review will start, is I think, okay, so Portishead put out this thing called Live in NYC, and it's a live concert, and it is amazing. It's easily the best concert film I've ever seen, which most people are going to say, like, what about The Last Waltz and whatever else, a million other concert movies that are better as far as everyone in the world's concerned. But in this one, I've never seen a band sort of be so quiet and so loud and so motivated to get the crowd involved. Like, they just blow it up. I don't have another term for it. They just blow the fucking lid off the place, and it's just amazing. But I think they sort of figured out that happened, and it was awesome, and they might want to try to recreate that in an album. But what that means is that when it starts, it sounds weird. It sounds bad. It sounds poorly recorded. And I don't know what the deal is. And, like, honestly, the first two songs, I adjusted my stereo endlessly trying to figure out, like, what is wrong with this recording? It sounds really terrible. The songs are good, but it seems like it's just this layer of bad recording on top of it. But as the third song starts to take hold, that production, like, slowly cleans up, and the vocals are coming in clearer and stronger, and you're like, wait, what the hell? This was a conscious decision? And then about halfway through the fourth song, called The Rip, it doesn't seem like that interesting of a song, but like halfway through, this arpeggiated synthesizer comes in, and it just transports you. You're just like, this is different. I don't know what I'm in store for right now, but something's happening here, and it's very strange. It's not what I expected to be experiencing right now. And then it just kind of continues on that path of, like, getting clearer and stronger and more exciting, I guess would be a word. Like, and until it's over, and it's just amazing. There's one song called Plastic on there, and it has this gated drum roll in it, and I've never heard anything like it. Like, the first time I heard it, like, it literally took my breath away. And that, I mean, what an experience as an old man who's been listening to music since, as far as I can remember, since a baby, like, to still be that affected and shocked by something was really cool. And I will say that Portishead's first two records are truly amazing. groundbreaking, beautiful pieces of work. But it's a little dated because of the scratching that they add throughout. I think it kind of puts it squarely in this sort of like 90s feel. It's kind of like, because it's not really part of the music, it's used as an instrument, kind of like how Incubus would have used it or something. Like it was a thing that happened during that time where it just goes, you know, and you're like, okay, great. That's missing from this completely. So if you think, oh, Portishead sounds dated, this doesn't. I don't think it does anyway. And yeah, I can't really say enough about it. It blew me away, and I loved it, and I love Portishead, and that's about it. What do you think, Dan?
I loved it. I loved every single minute of it, every single second of it. I don't have the near the history of Portishead that Erik does, because this is the first, and this might shock some people, but then I think people who know my tastes and what I was into, you know, what I was into when I was younger, it may not be so shocking, but this is the first Portishead record I've ever listened to. I've heard Portishead. There was like me and Erik were actually just talking about this before we started recording, that there was a hit, kind of like, and I wouldn't say it was like a huge hit. What did you say that was called, Erik?
I think Bitter Times might have been the hit.
Okay.
From Dummy.
I just remember, there was a video, and I do remember it was from the album Dummy, that they were showing on MTV, and that was pretty much the extent of it. Now, I've heard the name Portishead mentioned as an influence by a lot of people, and actually I've heard it mentioned by you and our friend Sean several times in the past as well, Erik. But yeah, this is the first time that I've actually given Portishead a chance, because you know, like trip hop in general, it's not really in my wheelhouse. You know, like I never really listened to Tricky or anything like that, but I've always respected it, and I've always known that there's cool stuff that comes out of it. But yeah, this record from beginning to end, I just loved it. To me, it was like a musical journey. And like you said, the production choices were quite interesting, because I do remember the first like couple of songs. Yeah, the production seemed maybe just a little grittier than the rest of the album, and then it just kind of, I don't know, it was almost like they opened like a door or something into this like just amazing sound, like as the record went on. That track you mentioned, the Rip, I mean, that's one of my favorites. I also really liked Magic Doors, and I thought Machine Gun was interesting. Yeah, just overall, I really, really liked it. And in fact, I have all the past Portishead records queued up on my Spotify, because I'm now going to go back and listen to those records.
I think you'll love them. I really do. I think that they're way cooler than you might expect. Yeah.
Cool. I'll have to check it out. My older sister, who is 7 years my senior, was really into the first Portishead record, I remember. And so, and that was another thing. My sister was into a lot of the more sort of trip-hoppy, mellower stuff. Yeah. And I was just a angry punk rock kid.
Yeah, that's the funny thing, too. Yeah, exactly. That's the funny thing about Portishead. I have to correct myself, too. The song was called Sour Times, not Bitter Times. So, anyway. Okay, Sour Times. Whenever I make a mistake on this show, it haunts me forever. I just hate it. It's like, like I said that Ministry had a song called Stigmata Martyr, which is a Bauhaus song. The Ministry song is just called Stigmata. Ooh, Stigmata. I'm glad that I got that off my chest. Oh, it's been bugging me for months.
And I might have just agreed with you. Like I might have just been like, "Oh yeah, I remember that song."
Yeah.
Because I'm not a Ministry expert at all.
Ministry expert. But yeah, Portishead was slightly different than the other trip hop stuff. I liked a lot of that too, but there's choices of samples and the fact that they played a lot of the instruments, played them, and they weren't samples. A lot of twangy, reverby guitars, a lot of samples from like spy movies and things like that. They had a different take on the whole thing than Tricky or Massive Attack or whatever. So I think it's one of those things where you get grouped in because that's what's happening elsewhere. You know, it's kind of like the Squirrel Nut Zippers being considered a swing band, even though they were a ragtime band. Like, but no one really cares.
Right.
You know, that's the other part too. It's like I can defend, you know, Squirrel Nut Zippers all day and no one gives two shits. So,
especially in 2021.
Yeah, right.
Like they had what, that one hit in like 96 called Hell or something like that, which that was part of that whole like very brief like swing revival that was going on.
Right, but that's the thing is they were not a swing band. But who cares? I don't need to defend.
Well, yeah, they called it swing though. Like with that name, that one band whose name aged horribly, the Cherry Poppin' Bands.
Oh yeah, that's good stuff. Zoot Suit Riot, solid.
Zoot Suit Riot.
And I think that song is actually more problematic than the name of the band. If anyone really wants to look into the history of the Zoot Suit Riots, it is not a fun, good time thing that happened. So anyway,
yeah, there definitely does seem to be like, that whole thing was bizarre, man. That like, hold on, no, we're not done talking about this, Eric. That whole thing, that whole like ska thing, that was sort of intertwined with the whole, like you said, Squirrel Nut Zippers were not a swing band, but whatever, they were lumped in with all the other swing bands of the time. What else? There was also that Brian Setzer, the Brian Setzer Orchestra, and, which I mean, the Stray Cats were awesome. You know what I mean? Like, I enjoyed them, but like, I never listened to that stuff. But God, that was one of the most bizarre things ever. Like, just complete proof that the late '90s existed in this like. Just strange, like looking back on it, it's like we really were on another planet back then, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's so weird just to think back to like all of that stuff.
Yeah, the dorks had their day, let's say.
They definitely did. That's for sure.
It was like if you were a band geek, the '90s kind of ripped for you. You know, it was like
the '90s were kind of
There's a lot of
like
music with horns out there. So
every punk band all of a sudden wanted a horn section for a little bit. Yeah. I will say the one band that has aged pretty well for me out of that whole thing, the Boss Tones. I still like the Boss Tones.
Fine. I like a lot of ska actually from that time period. I mean, like the Aquabats
are all bad.
Amazing.
Yeah, but the Aquabats are not really a ska band anymore at all.
Yeah.
I mean, the Aquabats really turned in. Have you heard their album Charge?
No, I don't think I've heard Charge. Is it just like Devo now?
It's they've completely gone into like that direction. And the thing about the Aquabats is they're so like versatile actually with their music. Like, did you ever watch any of the Aquabats Super Show?
I have seen a couple episodes, but not a lot.
That is maybe the best thing that TV has put out in the last like 15 years.
Wow.
I mean, seriously, it's like
I'll have
so
to get
good.
on that.
I love that show. And you might heavily disagree with me, but the entire series is on YouTube right now on the Aquabats channel.
I'm into it.
And it just totally reminds you of every cool thing from Saturday morning that we grew up with. Like, it has elements of Pee-wee's Playhouse. It has elements of, remember that Ernest show on Saturday mornings? Hey Vern, it's Ernest. That to me is like, that is gold. I love Hey Vern. I love anything with Ernest. Ernest was one of my favorite characters.
I love Ernest. I loved Ernest Goes to Jail, I think was my favorite. It's very stupid.
Oh God. Yeah, I love it when he makes that gun out of soap. That's like
I just like I can't remember the character's name, but the bad guy who's also played by Ernest. He does such a great job. He
does a great job.
And Bobby,
job,
the security guard. So freaking
the
good.
security guard was great.
And
that's freaking
the
awesome.
other one I like Goes to Camp a lot. But I really liked Slam Dunk Ernest too. But mostly mostly because the first time they give him the number of -0, I seriously thought I was gonna die. That was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Was just -0. It's so stupid,
dude. But I just recently saw Ernest Goes to Camp again, and I totally forgot just how dark that movie got.
Oh yeah, I'll have to check it out again.
Like the end of that movie, it ends up having a happy ending, but do you remember how dark that movie got?
At all.
Towards the end, it got really, really depressing to where it's like, honestly, like, it's like, wow. Like, because, Ernest, let's face it, was pretty much marketed to kids, And so I'm like 7 years old watching this, and it's like every 7-year-old thought the same thing. I won't remind you because I don't want to spoil it for anybody who's aching to watch Ernest Goes to Camp in 2021. But
spoiler alert.
Anyway, spoiler alert. We should totally, like, if I upload this episode on YouTube, I need to make like a big thumbnail. Ernest Goes to Camp. No spoiler alert. Like, just make it sound like this whole episode's about that.
It's getting there.
But it is. Yeah, you're right. But anyway, no, it got really dark. It got me close to crying when I was like 7 years old.
I'm going to have to see it.
Yeah. I'm surprised you don't remember it.
I didn't watch that one as much. I watched Goes to Jail, Scared Stupid, and...
Yeah, those are all classics. Rides Again. Did you ever watch Rides Again?
Pretty good.
That was a good one. I saw that in the theater with my friend Josh.
Oh, nice.
Well, you know Josh. I just remember that was a laugh fest. But anyway, we got more music to review, don't we? Yeah, we got one more. So who goes first with this one? Okay, so this is the local release we decided to review this week from area musician Brian Barr, who is also from Accelerativ, who a lot of you people out there probably know that group. They're a very heavy and I mean this is just another. I'm not going to say it's just another, but Brian Barr, like, there really isn't any surprises here for anybody who's familiar with Brian Barr's work. It's just really good, really well done drone music. And it's a lot of times reminds me of the intro to the Melvins album Lysol, or now it's called Self-Titled. It's just got a lot of different layers of sound, big wall of sound. And I mean, anybody who's familiar with Accelerativ should not be surprised by that. I really enjoyed it. And Brian knows this. I don't listen to a lot of drone. So I don't really have much to really compare this to, other than Accelerativ. So that's pretty much like, I'm going to just say recommend it if you like Accelerativ. But my two favorite songs on it were Granular and Breath. So good job on those songs, Brian. But for those of you, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and just say, that was a joke. It's like what Foghorn Leghorn would say. It's a joke, son. It's called Granular Breath, and the two tracks, the first one is called Granular, and the second one is called Breath. And they're both 15 minutes a piece, wall of sound stuff. So yeah, there's no surprises. This is totally what Brian has been doing and has been doing well for many, many years. In fact, for those of you who remember Accelerativ when it was just Brian's solo project, I mean, that's basically what Accelerativ started out as, was a Brian Barr solo album. It's really cool stuff. It gets very cinematic at times. Brian's always been a master at this kind of stuff. His guitar tone just rips right through you. And there's probably some other stuff that I missed, that I'm sure if I talk to Brian in person about, he'll probably, correct me on or something, because he's definitely way more of an audiophile than I am. I've known Brian for many years. Great guy. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. It just sounds really haunting, really dark, and kind of fun in a weird way too. What'd you think, Eric?
Yeah, I liked it a lot. Like you said, there's 2 tracks. They're both about 15 minutes long. Um, they, yeah, it's funny because I don't know if it ever goes full on just like white noise level noise. It's not just static at any certain point, which is a nice thing, or just the sound of instruments breaking or whatever. Like, this seems pretty well thought out, pretty well plotted out. It does. Both tracks follow sort of that trajectory that most ambient or noise or avant-garde things follow, which, you start out quiet, you build to a crescendo, and then it kind of dissipates. But within that context, I think Brian does a lot of really cool stuff. There's almost orchestral sounds to it at times. It sounds like strings sometimes. I would love to know if these were recorded live, or if it was multi-tracked. I know that Brian uses a ton of effects in a seed, and I assume for this too, and he does a lot with them while he's playing. So I don't know if all these were recorded live or if this was multi-tracked, which in and of itself, not being able to tell that is a really amazing thing, but yeah, it's so yeah, like I said, it's pretty restrained. I think that it's kind of comfortable. The songs are comfortable living in their own ambient heaviness that they've created. Like, it kind of just folds back onto itself a lot, and I think that's great. Like, if you're going to create essentially a world for people to spend time in, why would you constantly be trying to break that apart and ruin the illusion, And so I think that he understands that and doesn't ever try to push us out of this heavy ambient place that he's created. Nothing really comes out of left field or is abrupt or overt even. Like, it lets you spend time there, which is what I assume is exactly the point. I liked, especially on the second record, and I'll have to ask him about this sometime, he uses, I can tell what the sound is and what's happening is, but I don't know the exact pedal or effect or whatever. But he's using the bias, which means that he's overloading the circuitry a little bit. He's sending too much voltage, and a lot of pedals have this bias. And on this modular synth, it's something you use all the time, is that you adjust the bias and that creates a distortion or a fuzz. But what happens because of that, it's very splatty. It's like, it sounds like a computer breaking. So, I really
remember that
I
part
really
specifically
enjoyed
now
that
you mention
sound
it, yeah.
on the second track. It does fade away, which is cool. It's almost a relief when that sort of breaking electronic sound starts to go away a little bit. But it's really well done. And I liked hearing Brian do all this stuff on his own. I mean, I love Aseeth, and the guys in it are amazing musicians and they're great. But also just hearing all the intricacies of what Brian's doing on this is kind of nice too. So, yeah, I thought it was a really good listen. After we decided on this one and I looked at my other 2 picks, though, I was like, Jesus, we should start calling this podcast Doom Patrol or something, like, But I will say that none of this, I don't think Brian's sounded dark or desolate or anything like that. I don't think I got the sense of darkness from it. I don't know, which it seems like as we describe it, that's exactly what it would sound like. But I just didn't get that. It was more of a celebration of just living within heavy noise, you know, and that's kind of how it felt.
I can see that. And I can definitely see that description. Having known Brian for many, many years, it would make sense if that's what he was going for, because this is the stuff that he's always loved to create. And one thing that I know about Brian is when he puts work into something, I mean, he does it to just like the final degree. I mean, he works his ass off to make sure that whatever it is that he's creating, whether it's a t-shirt design, whether it's an ambient album, whether it's in a Seath riff or whatever, he'll make sure it gets to what it is that he's envisioning, you know? And so that would make sense if that's exactly what he's going for, because at this point in his life, I'm sure that he just loves celebrating the fact that he's kind of doing this sort of stuff still. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, and so, yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, great description.
Stuff. I liked it a lot. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, really, really fun. If you're a fan of, I mean, like I said, I don't really have a lot of things to compare it to, but I don't know. Do you have anything to compare it to? Because you're probably more of a...
Just like, I don't know, the kind of standard stuff. I don't know that much about Doom. I listen to a lot of it, but nothing
Sure.
too crazy. So like Jesu, I think it's like that in a lot of ways, ambient metal.
There you go.
Sono, Ohm, Boris.
Maybe a little bit of
Godflesh.
Godflesh.
Just stuff in that vein. Absolutely. Yeah.
Certain Melvins tracks, but definitely not all the Melvin
Right.
stuff, you know, but like certain elements
Right.
of the Melvins and Isis, Neurosis.
It's hard to compare those
stuff
things
like that.
because I think it's easy to cross over into stoner, and that's not what's happening here.
Yeah.
There's no groove to this. Like,
No,
you know,
not at
and
all.
so I think a lot of times stoner and sludge and doom and things are used interchangeably, and it doesn't always work. There are extremes on every end of each of those styles of music. Like, is this like Earth? Maybe, sort of, but not really, you know? So, yeah, I don't think there's any riffs per se that's not funky, you know? Like, this is...
Right.
closer to something like Sono or, yeah.
Yeah, you're not getting any blue cheer out of this one.
Yep.
But okay, so that wraps up all of our
Nice.
releases. I've already done the plug,
yeah.
Eric, so I don't have to tell everybody where to find us.
Nope.
I mean, you know, like, so I feel fulfilled. I feel like I've done my duty. How about you, Eric?
Yeah, I feel fine. Check us out on Instagram and Facebook, and smash that subscribe button. I don't know.
There you go. Smash the subscribe button.
Yeah.
Click
Those
click
aren't
the
even
heart
things, right?
on
Yeah,
Instagram.
click the heart.
Nah, no, that's
Click
definitely
follow.
on YouTube.
I don't know. Keep listening.
Yeah.
You know.
If okay, how about this? Go watch the videos, the two videos that we made, the one about MF Doom and the other one about bands that we feel have perfect discographies, and smash the subscribe button on that,
Just
because there
smash
really
it.
is a subscribe button on that. Smash it. That's another thing. There is the Accelerativ Thrust YouTube channel too, but
It doesn't have
that
a lot
one
of
is,
content yet.
well, it has content, but most of it is just me.
Right. Yeah.
Because it started before Eric became
Before
the
I was
co-host.
born.
When Eric came into this world, it was a very quiet, desolate place.
Everyone was so happy.
Much-
Before
Much like a Doom.
45 years ago in 3 days.
in
Yeah.
3 days. Oh, geez, the gospel
Yeah.
of Eric. Well, you got anything else? You got anything else, Eric? I'm
No,
actually kind of
if you, I did want to say, if anyone wants to interact with us, that would be really cool. Like, I know that people are listening.
that would be awesome.
Because we can see the numbers. But otherwise, it sort of seems like, this is all just going out into the void. So if you want to interact with us, and honestly, if you have a suggestion for a local review, or if, you are in a local group or something and want to do an interview, whatever, just like reach out to us. It would be super cool to hear from people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And actually, message either one of us on Facebook, on Instagram, message the Accelerativ Thrust sites. It doesn't matter. Just let us all know. And absolutely. We're looking for new content constantly.
Yep.
So
nice.
You've seen what we're capable of. Let's see what you're capable of.
Oh man, they're gonna totally lap us in capability. There's no way you'll be worse than us. So let us know.
There's absolutely no way. Okay, well that's all I've got. We will. Well, hopefully you'll be hearing from us next week. Oh, by the way, speaking of guests, interviews, and stuff like that, we are going to have Molly Piatetsky, the vocalist for Closet Witch. And she's really cool. I've known her for many years. And I am looking forward to talking with her.
Me too.
So she's going to be on next week. Please tune in for that. That is going to be one for the ages, folks.
It's going to be the best.
It's going to be the best. All right. Good night, good morning, whatever it is.
Bye.
Okay.